Hey everyone, welcome back to the Overseers. My name's Proelios and I'm joined as usual by my co-host Nightwing. How are you doing today?
Uh, it's better not to ask, but I do wanna say that I'm very interested in talking about the Guangzhou Charge today. Charge, wow, words. Yeah, this is a team that was a little bit up and down, but still not bad during last season.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to be interesting to see their prospects coming into this season.
Yep. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, as usual, we'll be going over the tank line first, then the DPS, then the supports, then the coaching staff, and then sharing our final thoughts to round off the session. So, let's start off with the tank line, which is Rio, Jihun, and Krong. So let's start off with the main tanks, which is Rio and Jihun. And I think let me go first, and then you can share your thoughts, Nightwing. So there was uh, the open scrim with the NYXL recently, I think yesterday, which I just watched bits and pieces of, but Nightwing will cover what he saw in those matches. But what I do have to say about Rio and Jihun is that Rio so far has been like an average main tank player in the league. He started off with the charge in season 2. Uh, Showed us some decent performances on all the main tanks, I think. Uh, as of late, I feel like his Winston and his Ball overall have been his best heroes, even if they've not been like overly exceptional. He still is a serviceable player, and he is versatile that way, right? Like he is not a liability to his team. He's stable in that regard. So not a bad main tank in my opinion, although they could do better. Uh, Speaking of Jihun, who is evidently sort of the ball one trick for this team, as he was for London last year, but wasn't fielded because ball wasn't meta for most of the season. Jihun overall is a really good ball player, but other than that, he doesn't bring anything to the team. Uh, because of which I feel like he is sort of like a low value pickup. Because if you want a ball player, you can probably just like develop Rio into being a better ball player, or sign someone who can play ball and maybe one more main tank which covers Rio's weaknesses. But considering that Rio's also decent at ball, they could have just picked someone else up. Either way, I understand their choice because the ball's Sigma meta has been really prevalent as of late, because of which any team would prefer to have like a ball specialist in case the main tank is supposed to be the carry for the team. So, in that sense, Jihun is a good pickup, but overall, just a lower value pickup than you would want for your team, I think. And Nightwing, yeah, I'll let you go next on these two main tanks.
Okay, I think I have kind of a different perspective on this. Um, so I watched the open scrim. Actually, I should probably begin by just saying that uh, in season three, you saw Rio with Guangzhou be very stable. I think he was not particularly terrible, um, and he could like pick up basically any main tank apart from ball for most of the season. But that's also, like you said, because ball wasn't played that much. And his ball does exist. I mean, he can play the hero, uh, and he could be serviceable on like Monkey, Ryan, Orisa, like which are basically the main tanks required last season. But I was kind of disappointed watching the open scrim, honestly, against NYXL because more than anyone else on their team, Rio was just consistently feeding on Monkey, honestly. Like he would just not set up properly. He would not hide before diving the backline or the DPS of the enemy team, and he would just take so much poke damage for no reason, honestly. And it was like I was watching Fraggy, but just worse. his Rhyme play was serviceable in that scrim. But I I mean, obviously you can't put too much stock into these things, but it was a pretty it's quite close to the season now. There's not even a month left. So you have to at least put some value in these matches that are taking place. They have to at least be taken as seriously as a scrim, uh, if nothing else. But yeah, not too impressed with Rio, and I think he's probably going to be kind of like below league average, honestly, just because like a lot of good main tanks are coming into the league, especially rookie talent like Mag, even though Mag is in NA and Guangzhou is in Asia. It's just like the level of main tank is kind of going to overwhelm Rio, I think. Jihun, I was actually surprised by because last season he was on London. That team didn't really do that well, and even then he wasn't really fielded that much over JMac. And the few times that he didn't look that impressive. But uh, so the thing is that the teams these days, the meta that's kind of developed as of late, the mainstay meta would probably be double bubble, but then teams that are not very comfortable with running that Winston Zarya comp, they move over to Brawl, which is better on maps where Winston is not very effective. But teams that do still want to run that kind of dive heavy, faster paced style, they go for the ball Zarya, and that's what Guangzhou played with Jihun, and when they subbed him in for Ilios, I believe, or was it some other map? I think it was Ilios. And the team with Jihun in there instead of Rio looked quite good. It looked a lot better and a lot less feed heavy. Uh, and Guangzhou were just able to execute better, I think. It might just be that the team is better practiced on that. But I mean, there is something to say if there seem to be a lot of individual mistakes coming out of the main tank when Rio was playing Winston in the double bubble. So I think Jihun, at the very least, he's going to have better looks than last season, I think, or at least be fielded a little bit more. I think ball will have more of a relevance coming into this meta. I mean, into the season potentially. Uh, and yeah, I think Jihun is a player that, while might not be at the very top, his ball play is definitely not bad, and he can surprise from time to time. That's what I think.
Yep, fair enough. Fair assessments. I can't really comment on those because I didn't watch the scrim to the extent you did. Uh, but yeah, I trust your judgment completely, and I think let's move on to Krong then, shall we?
Yeah.
Alright, so as someone who plays a ton of off tank, I've just been swooning over Krong's gameplay for the past year. This guy's evolved into an absolute legend for me. In fact, I think he probably was better than. I don't kill me for this. I think he was better than Void and ChoiSehwan last season. Uh, his Sigma was insane, absolutely insane. He's already known to play a great Zarya. His Hog is also pretty good, and Diva was also exceptional. Just if you have someone who can play all four off tanks at such a high level, that's nothing to like. That's not to be taken lightly. And I mean, he's an absolute god at this point for me. I'm just in awe at how good he was. I because I didn't expect him to be so good being a rookie player, right? But he just came in and caused like he turned a lot of heads is what I'm trying to say. And just I think he's going to be top tier once again, and he just elevates this team to a whole new level when he is relied on to make the plays. Do you agree with that, Nightwing?
Uh, Kronk came in last season as a rookie and looked quite good. Definitely competing with Void and Choi. I'm kind of a shock simp, so I'm not sure if I'd put him over Choi overall. But something I can say is that Kronk is very, very strong on basically all the off ranks. Where I think Choi sometimes is a bit weaker on the Zarya. that to the point where they sometimes put Smurf on Zarya, which is a bit sad. Because if you remember, like they would, yeah, I mean they would just put Smurf on Zarya, which would seem a bit questionable, but that's probably because they had to put Choi on Sigma, or was it?
Choi was
I'm not.
on Hog, or then they had put Super on Hog. They were still figuring out
Yeah,
their rotations. Because Hog Sig wasn't meta in NA yet. It was just being played in APAC.
yeah. Either way, like Choi Zarya has not looked exceptional even in season two. Uh, they were putting a currently controversial player on Zarya, so you didn't exactly get like all the goats knowledge for Zarya at that time. So I think that's something that Krong maybe has over him, and I think for Sigma, definitely you could put up a case that Krong is. There can definitely be an argument made that he's the best instead of just one of the best. I'm not sure if I'd agree with that, but there's definitely an argument to be made there. And I think uh, even in the open scrim, even if Guangzhou overall looked a bit like definitely the weaker team, honestly, Krong didn't make any major mistakes. He seemed very consistent, which is always good for an off tank. That's what other top teams are doing. They have this like just Chad off tank that they don't remove from the game. Um, they have Krong on Guangzhou, they have Void on Shanghai, they have Choi on Shock. So that's definitely good for the team. Uh, I think Krong individually is going to have a good performance this season, and apparently seems to be doing well with Jihun from what I saw on the Balls area. So probably not huge synergistic issues between the main tank and off tank in that sense. The Rio situation, I have no idea, but he's played with him for a season, so that's probably more just an individual lapse on Rio's part. I think Krong is a very solid player.
Alright. Yeah, so overall, I think the tank line is something we can move on from and start with the DPS. And let's then talk about the damage dealers, which are Eileen, MYKaylee, and ChoiSehwan. Let's start off with Eileen, who has been carried over from last season. And I think that's a really good choice because Eileen turned out to be a solid flex DPS player last year, especially when he pulled out his Genji and showed us some incredible performances in the, I believe it was the Summer Showdown, where they won the cup. And yeah, he's just a really good player because he covers all of the flanker heroes. He can play Tracer, Genji, Sombra, Doomfist, and he can also play a decent hit scan. Like you can field him on McCree without worrying too much about it. Not sure about his Ash and Widow, but I mean that much even that much flexibility is hard to find in a player at the Overwatch League level, even. So just a solid pick, and I'm glad they've retained him. And yeah, I'll let you share your thoughts on Eileen Nightwing.
Yeah, Eileen definitely showed his stuff in season three, especially on the Genji in Summer Showdown, where that got him to the voting for MVP, if I remember correctly, or was it rookie of the year? It was,
It was, I think, MVP.
yeah, it was MVP, which I thought was a bit much, honestly.
I agree.
Uh, but I mean, he definitely did do very well with the Genji, and that's part of the reason why they won the Summer Showdown. His tracer is also quite good. It's not up there with the top just tracer one tricks, tracer legends like Striker or Prophet or something like that, but it's
Mhm.
definitely serviceable, and that's why they keep putting him on the tracer. Uh, I think in season two he was playing a lot of Sombra, if I'm correct, and he played some in season three as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, his Sombra is quite good. Again, not completely top tier, but he can play the hero a lot better than probably a lot of other DPS players can, I think. So he's a good player, and I'm happy they've kept him. Uh, I think he's quite consistent. It's just that he's not completely like off the roof. like off the roof nuts, but he's quite good. And yeah, he definitely has a place in this roster. So I'm happy they have him. I think we can move on to the next DPS. Oh wait,
Mm,
have you talked about Eileen?
about?
Oh, you just did.
Yeah, I
My
did. I
brain
did.
is fried.
That's
Wow.
okay. Do you want to kick
Uh,
things off with MYKaylee?
yeah, sure. I can. Uh, MYKaylee is a Chinese player. He he comes in from Bilibili Gaming, which is I believe the Hangzhou Sparks academy team, and they did all right there. Not too bad. Uh, they came in third with him. But I was not really impressed with him and like actually looking at him at the quote unquote owl level in the open scrim. To be fair, NYXL had Guangbu, who was an absolute nut and surprised me a lot more than I was expecting, which is why it's called a surprise. But Guangbu just absolutely boomed MYKaylee. Like MYKaylee's widow did not exist, especially on maps like Gibraltar.
Would you
Like
would you say MYKaylee got guang boomed?
pretty much he got gang boomed. The entirety of NYXL ganged up and boomed him. Um, but yeah, I think MYKaylee had a very little presence on the map. He was being shut down very hard, which is weird because a lot of Guangzhou's resources were already been being put into shutting down Rio, clearly, because Rio was feeding as well. So I am not too confident about MYKaylee going into the season, despite his decent performance in Chinese contenders. I think there's a lot of other better head clickers out there.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I've watched him, of course, not in the open scrim, but I've watched his words in contenders a decent bit. I think he's probably going to be average, and that's my cat calling me to play. I'm just gonna ignore that for now. But yeah, so MYKaylee has not been too impressive for me. Even he's consistent, he's stable. That's at least something, and he's also flexible. He can flex onto certain projectile heroes like Farah and Echo. Although he hasn't naturally played those in recent metas because of how dominant hit scan picks have been. But I think that flexibility will be an asset for Guangzhou in the long run. And because of that, I don't think his pickup is inherently bad, even though he got beaten by someone like Guangbong, because Guangbong is really that good. So, really not a bad pickup. I think MYKaylee should slot in fine, and over time, they can definitely develop him into being a much better player. So, I'm overall positive, but still, let's not keep our hopes too high. And that's it. I think let's also talk about ChoiSehwan, whom I think is on pretty much the same boat. So he's a flex DPS player, um, and I believe he was an Element Mystic, right? Hang
Yep.
on, let me see. Yeah, Element Mystic. And admittedly, I haven't watched a lot of footage of him, so I can't really form a very informed opinion about him. But he seems to be a serviceable player as well. He has got a wide hero pool, and I mean that's pretty much it. From what I've heard from you know different like online websites, obviously Reddit and just some other sources like blog posts and stuff like that. He's People have seemingly not got too high hopes for him, but he's not a bad player either. So again, let's assume him to be league average because not everyone can just impress through tryouts, right? If they've gotten in despite not being too popular of a player, they definitely have some skill in them. So this is why you'll see this trend where I'm generally optimistic about unknown players because that means they've done something impressive in tryouts and actually beaten out some of those popular players. So overall, that's why I think ChoiSehwan should be fine as well. But yeah, like I said, let's not keep our hopes too high. Nightwing?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I'll be completely honest with you. The reason why I don't have too much to say about Ansun J and Choi Se Wan is just because I kind of missed out on this element Mystic. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
it's, I think I definitely should kind of go back and watch them at some point, considering I'm recording a series for it. But uh, I don't know. He is a flex DPS player. The team has done well, ish in contenders career, coming third to fourth. Not quite the very top, but it's something. It's still the contenders level, and often contenders teams, especially Korean contenders teams, uh, can outperform, can have players that like individually outperform our level players. So it's not probably too far of a shot to say that he could be league average, but I think that's all I can say in good faith, honestly. He's a flex DPS. It's always fun to see flex DPS picking up the silly heroes, picking up the Genji, the J-Crack, the Pharah, the Echo, the Doom. So, you know, good luck to him. But I have no idea. It's a big question mark for me. But I think I am a bit concerned that they did not choose to field him in the open scrim. Maybe they're working on the particular meta, and that meta just doesn't suit ChoiSehwan. But considering that it's an open scrim just being broadcasted kind of for fun, even though it's a serious match and a serious scrim, uh, I'm a little bit concerned that they didn't field him. But maybe they were just trying to stick with a particular roster because we're quite close to the season, and then just developing ChoiSehwan as time goes on. Or maybe he overslept. Who knows? That's something that happens very often in Overwatch. But I don't know. Uh, yeah, good luck to him, but it's kind of a question mark for me.
Alright, then let's move on to the support line, which is Mandu on main support and KariV on flex support. So, looking at Mandu, who's coming in from the NYXL, uh, he is someone that hasn't had a chance to play for the NYXL despite being with them for a year. Uh, from what I've seen from his time before he was on the NYXL, uh, he's pretty good. He has proven to be a really aggressive, solid, mechanically skilled Lucio player, and he is quite like vocal in that regard, seemingly from what I hear. So having him in just being like a stable shot caller for the team is going to help them out, and even just having someone like who can uh, not only just support the team on Lucio but also frag out while doing it. It's a little similar to what you would imagine someone like FD God to do, except FD God goes more for those cheeky plays, whereas Mandu just goes up like straight up aggressive and tries to contest other DPS players or supports. So in that sense, I think he fits in with sort of the approach this team has been taking, because even Rio and Krong like to play aggressively. So yeah, I think it's a good pickup and a good fit for the team overall. Do you have any additional points to add about Mando?
I think they probably signed Mandu based off of tryouts and some past history with some well-known players because he used to play on O2 Blast with players like Krong, Myeonbong, uh, I think
Yeah.
Flora as well, and so he has had some good teammates with him. So maybe that kind of contributed to it because we didn't. He was just like they have those missing person images on like milk cartons. Like, have you seen this man? Have you seen this cat? Mandu is kind of like that because they did not want to field him, and I don't blame them. They have other players, but I think if anything like made them like Mandu, it's probably some past history and mostly just the result of tryouts. Uh, so if they were able to impress, then that's good. I think uh, he didn't look too hot uh, in the cup. I mean, in the open scrim, but I mean, he was there. I think I was a lot more impressed by the other support that was KariV.
Mm-hmm.
but Mandu was there. He wasn't. Thankfully, Rio was feeding much harder, so Mandu didn't look too bad. But I don't know honestly. He didn't really seem very exceptional, but on the kind of role he was playing, it didn't really like. It's hard to stand out in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to talk about KariV though. So unless you have something to
Oh no, go
say
ahead,
about,
go ahead. You can start with KariV.
okay, KariV. I think most like mediocrely like medium interested fans of Overwatch League probably like KariV. I mean, he has that nice friendship with Agilities. They made, Valiant had like Valiant and Toronto like just made big bucks off of that friendship, marketing it. Um, but uh, he goes, he goes out of Toronto and into Guangzhou. I wasn't actually expecting that much from him because over time, like even though he has impressed like on an individual level, his teams have not really performed too well, especially Toronto. I mean, in season one, Valiant still did all right, but season two, Toronto was just not that great. Uh, and also season three. So yeah, I mean, KariV is has not had a lot of expectations for him, but I was kind of surprised that he was doing a lot more than Jonak on the other team on this open scrim. I mean, he would every single map, like with no exception, Jonak would do less damage than KariV. He would land less nades than KariV. KariV got a lot of high value utility on the Ana and the BAP compared to Jonak, which I thought was very impressive, considering that whenever the spectators swapped over to Jonak's perspective, he would always be shooting. He didn't even bother pressing right click to heal. But KariV somehow outdamaged him by almost like 40-50%, which is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And while also maintaining more heals than Jonak. I mean, I thought that was very interesting. Uh, And the only highlight for KariV recently has been that one Zen clip from last season that people are milking to death in every frag movie, where he kills like 5 people on uh, Nepal Sanctum. Apart from that, KariV has kind of just been quiet. But after seeing him diffing Jonak, I mean, Jonak is not like the top tier of flex supports anymore, but that's still promising, I think, for KariV.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think he's definitely going to be one of the least questionable pieces of this roster, honestly. Uh, I think Eileen and KariV are like going to be quite solid. Like, I don't think KariV will like let you down, even if you won't contend with like the best flex supports like Violet or something.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
I have always been high on KariV as an individual talent. Uh, he has always shown a lot of mechanical skill, because of which he has been fielded even for DPS in the past by the Valiant. Although yeah, that hasn't worked out in all the circumstances.
I remember the KariV Widow
Yeah,
on throw. He would just pull it out randomly.
yeah, yeah, and I mean that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? He has a ridiculous amount of mechanical skill. Even if you go back to his performances in season two with the Valiant, everyone remembers that turnaround match that the Valiant had against the Vancouver Titans, where they ended up beating the Titans. Like they played triple DPS and beat the Titans who were playing goats. So that was a lot of credit for that went to Karif Zana, with which he was just landing sleep darts on Farah of all heroes, right? And that was just absolutely insane because even the Titans had to adapt and they had to play some DPS heroes of their own. And just Karif just showed a lot of promise. But what I think is that based on his play style, right? I don't know if he's going to be a good fit overall for the team. Like he may work with the team. I don't think the team can work with him. If you get what I mean. Uh, so far, based on what I've seen, KariV stands out when he's the playmaker. He's not someone who is meant to take a back seat, right? And he's not even really known for his team synergy or like communication skills. He's just known for popping off whenever he gets the space. So he essentially needs his team to play around him to maximize his value, which is probably not a good fit for a team like Guangzhou because they have other players who are trying to achieve the same thing. They just want like a stable backline based on what I've seen. Uh, Generally, they have like players like Krong and Eileen who make the huge plays, and that's why they had like even Shu had to play like a. Even though Shu did make those occasional plays, he had to play a very supportive role for the most part, even though he also is like mechanically gifted. So, although I think KariV is an incredibly talented individual, I'm a bit skeptical about how the play styles, like, if he's going to get the resources he needs to actually enable his team in an actual match setting. So, that's all. I think if you're playing some meta like Mercy Zen or Brig Zen, where KariV's just allowed to frag out and then he gets all the peel he needs, this team's gonna work great. But if you're playing something like mm, a Moira Lucio, that's not something KariV's gonna excel at because he's not known for like just playing a very defensive style. He's a pretty aggressive flex support, and that's what we are going to have to wait and see. Like, does this style work out with the team or not? So yeah, those are my thoughts on KariV. Do you have any more points to add?
I wonder if it was Shu that was like just holding Rio together into like the realm of living, just by the like force of his will, considering what Rio looked like uh, in this open scrim without Shu in the roster. Um, yeah, I think KariV is probably a not even probably, it's definitely a downgrade from Shu, but I still like him as a player. I think you're definitely right that there might be some resource management issues, but I think Guangzhou can somewhat adapt to that. I think Eileen, for example, is good at being a low resource and a high resource consuming player because he can move over to play heroes like Tracer, where he really doesn't need any support at all. Almost, he'll operate individually, or he on heroes like Genji, where I mean the nature of the hero is to consume resources, then he will. But I think KariV can definitely find a spot on this roster. I think you're the most of the points that you're making are right, and I think this team will struggle compared to last season, but uh, because they don't have as good a flex support as Shu. But I mean, KariV should do a decent job.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think individually he's going to have problems. I'm just curious whether he'll get the resources he needs from his team.
Yeah,
Uh,
thankfully
yeah.
they have a good flex support in Neko, who did do the golden stage with Boston Uprising in season one as an assistant
Sure.
coach.
Yeah.
So so maybe Neko can help KariV out. Who knows? I mean, maybe he's what helped Shu as well. I mean, Shu was already looking good before he came into the league, but
Mm-hmm.
still, I don't know. At least they have a player that can kind of micro coach him. I mean, they have a coach that can kind of micro coach KariV if he does turn out to be an issue.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that Guangzhou have got going for them.
Well, speaking of the coach, why don't we talk about Arachne, who's coming in from the San Francisco Shock as the head coach for the Charge? Why don't you kick us off on him?
Uh, I mean, Arachne, yeah, he comes in from Shock. He's had some success with them, uh, and that's good, definitely. Uh, he knows what kind of Krusty's teaching method is, how you just make a roster more cohesive. So, but I don't really know what Arachne is like as a coach by himself, to be perfectly honest. We're just assuming that he's just subscribed to the Church of Krusty. and will deliver like similar levels of coaching, or at least the same style of coaching, even if not to the same effectiveness. Uh, it's definitely a plus point for Guangzhou, but I mean, it's a different person at the end of the day, so I can't really say for sure. But his past experience definitely should show him what a winning roster looks like and thinks like and functions like, which is something that helps. Uh, Hopefully, all the Herbalife that they'll be contractually required to take won't mess up their gameplay too much.
Yeah. So yeah, I think Arachne is going to do like really well on the charge. He naturally achieved a lot with the San Francisco Shock last year, and even before that, when he was with Talon Esports, he coached them in many successful tournaments where they got like first or second place. So I think he's got a ton of like championship experience with him now, and just bringing that to a whole new roster and like just being a more like knowledgeable person is going to help him elevate his level of coaching. And I can actually already see hints of crustiness in him. He's approached this diverse DPS lineup for the charge, which is very reminiscent of Krusty's scouting and like his style of forming a team. So like look at the DPS players he has. Right, he's got Eileen, who's comfortable on all the flankers and some hit scan heroes. MYKaylee mostly plays hit scan but can play projectile. ChoiSehwan just plays like flankers and projectile heroes. So you can see like there's a really good amount of diversity even though there's just three DPS players. So I have a feeling that he's going to do something like what Krusty did where he sets up like map based DPS rotations and just puts them on the signature heroes and doesn't let them play anything else.
One
So
thing,
yeah,
one thing that's interesting that I forgot to mention actually, since you talked about him like setting up his team's positioning like Trusty, is I was watching the open scrim with the co-stream from Natter, who is a contenders coach, and he's a really good coach. He used to coach Third Impact, I think.
yeah,
He pointed out that the rotations that when they were playing Icon Wall with the brawl comp with Ryan and Zarya, the rotations that Guangzhou were making were like like shock, but like slightly scuffed shock because they were not as well practiced. But
there
like
you go.
he said like Guangzhou's rotations with that brawl comp, not so much with their dive, but with that brawl comp, they were playing very similarly to Shock. So I guess Arachne is kind of bringing that style. Uh, and who knows, maybe that particular style of brawl was actually developed by Arachne and not. I mean, it's not like Krusty does everything.
Yeah,
So if that's the case, then I'm actually quite hopeful for the coaching that Arachne is delivering. Because if you remember the brawl style that Shock played, they were actually nuts on it. They
mm,
would they would play King's Row so well with that Ryan Zarya comp, with super uh, on Ryan and Moth on Lucia. Like I keep mentioning that in every episode because every time they will pull up with King's Row, I mean I just knew it was going to be a storm pretty much every time. So I think that's something really promising actually for Arachne, despite how neutral I seemed at first.
oh, yeah, no, for sure. And I think Arachne gives like at least me a ton of hope about the charge. They, I think we can start rounding off the episode here. Actually, just share our final thoughts on the charge. Just overall, I think looking at the tank line, mm, it's probably like somewhere above average just because Krong is that good and Jihun is like a specialist. Rio is just there like to cover the other main tanks. Uh, I'm hopeful about the DPS line as well. I think they will also be above average, especially because Arachne will likely try to put them on their signature heroes. And then the combination of ChoiSehwan and Mandu, it's going to be. What should. I think it could probably just be average, uh, based on what I'm seeing, but if they are not being relied on to make the plays, then that'll be a style which will really benefit the charge because you've got star talent like Krong over here and even Eileen. So you really want them to make the plays for this team, and if KariV's playstyle doesn't actually clash with that, I think it's something to like they can smile about, right? It looks to be a good. It looks to have been a good off season for the Charge, even considering the loss of Shu, which is quite sad. But yeah, we'll get to Shu when we talk about the Gladiators. And yeah, those are essentially my thoughts. I think it's an optimistic outlook from my side for the Charge.
I think I'm honestly not that sad about Shu leaving because KariV, I still like KariV.
Yeah.
And his gameplay, at least from what I saw, is still quite good. And I think he can definitely be coached into like working better with the team. Because thinking about it now, I'm actually quite hopeful about Arachne's coaching. So I think he'll kind of be able to figure that out. I think I'm more sad about Happy being uh like him
Oh yeah.
leaving the team.
Yeah. Major loss.
Happy was cracked. I mean, if you saw Happy in that match versus Guangzhou, that would be anyone's game. And
Yeah.
even then, I maybe slightly favor Happy, even though while I was watching it, I was thinking Guangdong is putting up like an enhanced level performance, but that's just the excitement of a Overwatch viewer, maybe.
Hmm.
But I think MYKaylee is kind of a step down, to be honest with you.
Agreed.
Uh, and yeah, I mean, Shu was great, but I miss Happy, and I think I don't know what he's gonna do on Houston. Honestly, it's a bit of a step down for him in terms of uh, the kind of environment around him, in my opinion. Uh, but apart from that, like good coaching, good off tank, uh, average main tanks. Uh, Eileen's quite good and consistent. I think Guangzhou are in a good spot. They just have to, I guess, listen to the coaching properly, and I think they can get something done this season. They're not too bad.
Hmm. I think should we call it then for this episode?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So thanks to everyone who's been listening so far. Do help us keep the conversation about the Overwatch League alive and fresh by doing all the typical YouTube stuff like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on your notifications, comment, share the video. We'd really appreciate all of those things. And yeah, in the next episode, we'll be covering the Soul Dynasty. I'm sure you don't want to miss that, considering we'll be talking about the god himself, Prophet, and the team he has got around him this year. So, yep, the Soul
Wait,
Dynasty next time. Yep,
make sure to comment RIP happy if you miss him on Guangzhou Charge.
yep.
That's
R.I.P.
all.
Happy. Yep. All right. Yeah, I think we'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.